Hey, this is Chris from Rekkid Talk, and so we're going to do a thread that a lot of people have been doing. So I'm going to be showing you 10 CDs that I would like to see on vinyl. I think Mazzy was the first one, Norman Masloff, who did this thread, and lots of other people have done it. And my take on it is I know some people have done it where it's something they have on CD they would like to have on vinyl. It exists on vinyl, but the vinyl might be rare and expensive. In my case, at least according to my cursory research on Discogs, all 10 of these records have never been released on vinyl, so they're either only available on CD, maybe a few of them are available on cassette tape as well. I didn't double check that, but that's the idea. So of course, time frame wise, that's pretty much going to limit you to stuff from the 1990s and the 2000s. Probably not going to be anything that's a huge album, because if it wasn't released on vinyl then, if it's like one of these really big albums, it would have gotten reissued. Even a lot of stuff that wasn't that big has gotten reissued. It probably, my list leans, I think it's entirely American artists. I know vinyl did hang on a few more years in other parts of the world than it did in the United States. Some albums I'm not showing today, were ones where the vinyl issue may have existed overseas in Europe or other parts of the world, either was never released in America or was released more recently in a reissue. Okay, but let's get into it. So the first one I'm going to show you is Violent Femmes New Times. This is from 1994. And you can see I have the snazzy, the BMG Record Club version. So I think this was the last major label release that the Violent Femmes had. I don't think it was a very successful record, but the Violent Femmes seemed to me to be a big enough, important enough band that their material probably shouldn't really exist on the unreleased in vinyl version. Next, also from 1994, Edie Brickell, Picture Perfect Morning. So I guess there's no new Bohemians, it's just Edie Brickell. And of course, she's been married to Paul Simon for many, many years. And she's somebody that I'm sort of surprised exists in a state where she has albums that have not been reissued. I mean, I know again that this was not one of her hit records. Many of the albums I'm going to be showing today for regular viewers are going to come from sort of the Blake Babies rock family tree. And the first such one is The Mysteries of Life Keep a Secret from 1996. So this would have Frida Love Smith, who was the drummer of the Blake Babies. Her husband Jake Smith was sort of the leader of this band, and a couple other members as well. They had this wonderful song called Going Through the Motions. There is actually a 7-inch promo version of that song that I own. But this album and their subsequent albums were never released on vinyl. This was actually on a major label. This was MCA. I think they, RCA. And Going Through the Motions is one of those really great sort of forgotten 90s song, kind of on the mellow side of alternative. You knew I was going to show something by Juliana Hatfield. Basically, Juliana Hatfield's discography starting in 1997 with an EP. This album, Bed, from 1998, and most of her work up through the early 2010s exists in the CD-only world. Hoping that eventually maybe American Laundromat or Ye Old Records or somebody will do some reissues of this stuff. I have the Japanese version of the CD, so it includes the Bed album, the Please Do Not Disturb EP, and a couple of bonus tracks. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and get in John P. Strom as well. So all three key members of the Blake Babies. So he released some solo albums in the late 90s, and I think one in 2007. So this is one called Vestavia, which is generally considered to be his best. And so by this point of time, he had become pretty influenced by Americana, and that's where he's gone with his songwriting. Of course, he's been a music industry lawyer for several years now, was president of Rounder Records for a while, but he does have a new album coming out this year. That is going to be out later this year on Propeller Sound Records. It's called Something to Look Forward to. Somewhat in that realm as well is the band Verbena, Into the Pink. So the Birmingham, Alabama based. And for just about any sort of musical scene, there's going to be a band that's great, but really came along a few years too late and kind of got looked over. And so for your sort of your harder alternative, so Scott Bondy was the lead singer of this. More recently, he's rebranded himself as A.A. Bondy as kind of an indie folk, but he was definitely sort of a Iggy Pop-ish rocker at this point of his career. He was Juliana Hatfield's boyfriend for a while. I think he's the one she wrote about in her book under a pseudonym, who had a big drug problem. There was a woman in the band named Anne Marie Griffin, who sang and, depending on the album, played either bass or rhythm guitar. This album was actually produced by Dave Grohl because he was a fan of the band as well, but that didn't really help them out because you probably don't remember Verbena. 2001, we've got the Disco Biscuits. So this is sort of your jam bands, where jam bands are starting to get a little bit electronic involved. And looking it up, I was sort of surprised, but they haven't done this on vinyl. Local H, a great band from Chicago. I talked about this album before, Whatever Happened to PJ Souls, from 2004. It was the first and I think last album released on Studio E Records, and so the sad truth is this may never be reissued in any format, vinyl, CD, because apparently the ownership of this is a complete legal mess. I paid too much to get this on the used market, and if you want to get it on the used market, you'll have to pay too much as well. Lauren Hoffman Choreography from 2005. I've talked about Lauren Hoffman before, particularly with her debut album from 1997 called Megiddo. She was like only 19 or so when that came out. Kind of a great forgotten female singer-songwriter. And so she probably, again, came along a little bit too late for that scene. Choreography comes from the fact that she actually went to college and studied modern dance. So she's got the dance influence along with her music. This is kind of under the realms of, you like Fiona Apple, you like Amy Mann, you'd probably like some Lauren Hoffman. I pretty much have all of her records. Everything's pretty obscure. Her debut is the only one that's ever been reissued on vinyl. This is probably, after Megiddo, Choreography, I would say, is her second best album. At some point, I'll give you guys the Nobody Asked For It, ranking the albums of Lauren Hoffman. And then the final thing I'm going to show you is from 2016, which really seems too late for something to not have come out on vinyl. Because at this point of time, everybody is putting stuff out on vinyl. At this point, it may be more likely that people aren't bothering with CD. Most of the artists that aren't doing vinyl at this point, that are doing a physical format, might be your very DIY underground groups that are putting out a CD-R or putting out a cassette tape. Sort of similar to, there was a point of time where those were the only sorts of people that were putting out 7-inch vinyl records. So who would think that apparently the last thing that Paul Westerberg ever released on a physical format is only on this Digipack compact disc. So the I Don't Cares and yes, Juliana Hatfield teamed up with Paul Westerberg for this particular album, and their names do not appear anywhere on this album. This very much kind of flew under the radar. If you haven't bought this CD already, again, the aftermarket's going to soak you for this one. So again, it was mostly songs that Paul Westerberg had written. Juliana encouraged him to, hey, there's some great songs here, you should release them. I think a few that they co-wrote together. So some great songs like King of America, a redone version of, where is it? Born for Me, which off his Suicane Gratification album, Whole Lot of Nothing, Hands Together. I mean, come on, this screams record store day all over it. I'm not going to hold my breath because I don't think Westerberg gives one single solitary shit about anything involving the music business anymore. So there are my 10 CDs, never on vinyl, that I would kind of like to see on vinyl.